After a postseason appearance in 2024, a lot of people are high on the Denver Broncos. However, will they live up to those very high expectations? We'll explore that today here on 32 on 32 here on Chase's Sports News, where we preview every team season with a team reporter. Today, we preview the Denver Broncos' upcoming season with a very special guest, one of their team reporters locally, Benjamin Allbright. Benjamin, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
I'm so glad you are joining me today. And what I said at the beginning is really true. This Broncos team has a lot of hype. I'm personally very high on this football team, and I'm excited to break down some of the things that they could do this coming season. Real quick, I know you are obviously kind of in the Denver area, been covering this team. What has stood out to you thus far from Broncos training camp?
Well, the defense is, which was very, very good last year, is at an elite level. I think they're going to be a top three and maybe not third defense in the league this year. They are very good. They're well ahead of the offense 1 week into training camp. On the offensive side, I mean, you've seen some improvement, especially from the year two type players. Troy Franklin, who frankly had a bad camp last year, has looked a little more settled down. So that bodes well. Devon Vele playing pretty well. Yeah, I think as you look at the Broncos offense, it's little things. It looks more smooth, and I think that's because you're helmed by a quarterback going into his second year who's not drinking through a fire hose on a lot of that stuff. So that should help. Offensively, I think the optimism right now might be a little bit much. But we'll see. The defense is very, very good, and we saw last year how they'll be able to keep them in games no matter what. It's going to be interesting because this team could be better than they were last year and still have the same record. It's
Right.
a very, very difficult schedule. But you've got a defense that's going to be very good and an offense that looks like it's trending in the right direction, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, record is not always the indicator of how great a football team is, and that's something I stress so often. Is it really just is situational, depending on where they are toward the end of the year, how they're peaking at the right time, what the injuries have been. If you have a difficult schedule, I think a lot of people look at record as the determining factor of success. That's not always the right way to look at things. I'm excited to see what Denver can do, and we'll break down the schedule later on here. But you want to talk about overachieving? I mean, that's what they did last year. Their preseason over under was 5.5 wins. They instead won 9 games. You make the playoffs. What do you believe were the key reasons why Denver made that unexpected run?
I think there's a combination of things. I think the defense, which I pointed out last year, was very good. Was better than people thought it was. I remember in the preseason telling people to hammer the over because getting 6 wins was absurdly easy.
Right.
Um, the defense of this team. I mean, it is very, very good defense. I cannot stress that enough. On the offensive side of the ball, it took a couple of weeks, but they finally started to get there. You saw Bo, excuse me, you saw Bo, it kind of mature in real time. And I
Yeah.
think that was the part of it. The first couple weeks of the season wasn't very good. In fact, I don't think he had a passing touchdown to something like week four or whatever it was. But it took him a while to kind of get there to start to click. But then as it did, we saw that come along. I also saw, late in the season, some players that had gotten in Sean Payton's doghouse. Got some run, whether that was due to injury or whatever else, and they started showing what they could do. Guys like Marvin Mims, who for whatever reason had gotten in the doghouse, even though he was by far their most explosive weapon. And we saw that game after game. He just got better every single game throughout the year. So that those things like that, and then the other part of that is the run game. The run game was not very good last year.
Yeah.
They were okay catching out of the backfield, but just running the football was not very productive. And so that's been an emphasis this offseason. They drafted RJ Harvey. They brought in J.K. Dobbins. Those guys are going to be RB1 and 2 for this team, and they expect that an improved run game will help make everything better.
Absolutely. I think a rushing attack is so key. I mean, you look at some of the best running teams in the NFL this year, Baltimore, Philadelphia. Those are oftentimes the teams that have the most success when you can have a plus quarterback like Denver has with Bo Nix under center, combined with a really solid rushing attack. As a Baltimore Ravens fan myself, J.K. Dobbins, I will always love him and always respect his game. I love that move for Denver. That R.J. Harvey's great. How much do you believe a solid running game would really help Bo Nix in the passing game in year two?
Well, you got to believe it will. I mean, teams last year by the end of the year weren't even afraid of the run game, and so they were selling out against the pass, and that sort of helped slow things down for the offense late in the season. If you're able to keep people um, guessing, you're able to keep defenses sort of off balance and pursuing the run game. that will help out quite a bit, and I do believe that that can be a thing, and you can build off play action. Bo's a guy who likes to get it out pretty quick, doesn't like to take sacks, negative plays, things like that. And so I think having a run game will only help benefit him.
Obviously, Bo Nix was great. We're going to talk about him a little bit later. First off, though, I do want to talk about some of the other moves they made in the offseason. You mentioned how the defense looks great in training camp. I mean, how could it not? You have one of the league's best defenses last year, now plus Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga from San Fran, and obviously Jahade Barron in the draft. You mentioned Dobbins and RJ Harvey. Felt like this team had a really good offseason. Just what were your overall thoughts on some of their additions this past spring?
Yeah, I thought so. I mean, the offense is firmly Sean Payton's at this point. We haven't even mentioned Evan Ingram, who they brought in as
Yeah.
a as a tight end or off the line Y. I mean, yeah, Pat Bryant, Evan Ingram, those guys are Sean Payton offense type guys. Certainly, and so I think the offseason has been a lot of optimism. I mean, this is the first time the Broncos have been to the playoffs since their Super Bowl in Super Bowl 50. And so it had been a while. And this is a fan base that's not really used to playoff droughts. When Pat Bowlen was the owner here, they had more Super Bowl appearances than playoff droughts. So, the Broncos, for quite a while were kind of one of the pinnacle franchises of the league. And then, sort of fell backwards after that Super Bowl with Mr. Bolin passing on and the trust running things. It was kind of
Yeah.
tough. Now they've got new ownership and the Walton Penner Group, one of the well, not one of the wealthiest owners in the NFL by far. And that has really helped kind of, I think, spark things here in Denver. So there's a sense of kind of cautious optimism that they'll be able to build off last year, even if they did backdoor their way into the playoffs by beating the Chiefs backups in the last week of the season. In order to get there, although they had opportunities, could have beaten the Bengals or the Chargers in the weeks before that, and let those get away from them. So, I think there's a sense of optimism. I think 10 wins is kind of the local bar, and barometer as far as that goes.
Yeah, and I think this team has the potential for more. I mean, to me, it will come down to the quarterback position. Hopefully, you won't see it, but if this team does see a sophomore slump from Bo Nix, they will be heavily reliant on its defensive production, and that will change things. But I love Bo Nix, and he was not very hyped entering last season. I am on the record saying that I did not believe he was going to be a great quarterback in the National Football League, and I will say here that I was wrong. And I love what he did last year, and he did it with kind of a minimal receiving core. He didn't really have much around him. So, what really impressed you last year most about Nix, and do you believe he can kind of improve upon that this coming year?
Well, I think the big thing for me was just not taking a lot of negative plays. The thing about the quarterback before him, which was Russell Wilson, is Russ takes a lot of sacks. But that's because he's trying to play hero ball. He's always looking for that deep shot, always looking for that, and so there's some give and some take. You live by, die by. Russ is one of the better, fourth quarter comeback quarterbacks in NFL history because of that. He'll take a few sacks, but he can also bail you out of those sacks with his arm at times. But for a guy like Sean Payton, that's not the way he does things. Sean Payton is a very schedule oriented offense kind of guy, comes from the old school West Coast philosophy, and Russ was not a fit for that. Bo is probably a better fit for that. He likes to get the ball out quick, doesn't take mistakes, takes a negative play, something like every 82 snaps, I think, which it would be an interception, a fumble, or
Yeah.
a sack. That's a really high amount. And so if you can keep an offense on schedule like that, you can have success, win games, and make the playoffs. Alex Smith is probably one of the most glaring examples of that. A guy who didn't have the strongest arm, but got it out quick, didn't take sacks, didn't throw interceptions, didn't fumble the ball, didn't take negative plays. You can win with that. And if you got a good enough defense, you might even be able to win a Super Bowl with that. Now, you probably need plus traits to get you over the hump and be a guy that can carry a team, but Alex was a guy who puts you in the playoff conversation every year. Pat Mahomes is a guy who puts you in the Super Bowl conversation every year. The question is, which one is Bo? Because
Yeah.
last year he played like Alex. Now he's got a stronger arm than Alex Smith did, and we'll see what that is. But now teams have a year of tape on Bo Nix, pro tape, not that stuff at Oregon that nobody in the pros runs.
Yeah.
And an off season to kind of game plan him. And so we're going to see what defensive coordinators put together to try to stymie him this year.
It's always that conversation about a sophomore slump, and a lot of the attention has gone to Jada Daniels about the possibility, but Bo Nix as well, because he did overachieve. And I think it's kind of unfortunate that his success, what was it, 32 passing touchdowns, has kind of been overshadowed because of what Jada Daniels did. Not to discredit what Daniels did at all, but Bo Nix was also right there, I feel, amongst the best rookie quarterbacks in the NFL. And obviously, when you look at what Brock Bowers did, it was overall just a great rookie class. And I think what Bo Nix did really needs to be recognized. To me, I think the biggest thing that is maybe stopping him from reaching that next level in year two is his receiving core. And I think the Cortland Sutton's obviously solid. He's now extended. Evan Ingram, he's fine, but a little inconsistent. I just don't know if this team has enough in the pass catching room to really support Knicks the way the other teams have.
Well, that's a Sean Payton thing. I mean, Sean Payton has consistently been a coach who didn't want to pay his receivers, didn't want to build out, receiving cores that way. You build it out through the draft, pay one guy, and then and then you rotate the other guys through as you go. He likes to have a high volume, short route pass catcher out of the X. Typically the slant receiver out of the X, and then a burner on the backside at the Z, and that guy's gonna. That'll be your burner guy. He'll get fewer targets, and then he goes to the running back and the tight end a lot. I mean, four All Pro seasons in his head coaching career out of tight ends, out of three different tight ends, is certainly something. But Sean Payton receiving cores are structured that way. Not a lot of big names. You got one guy that's kind of the guy, then a bunch of young guys that you're hoping can be the next guy, and that's sort of been his mo over the years. So that's the thing. I mean, I think the receiving core is probably more talented than people think. I think Vele is just as good as Tim Patrick was when he was here. I think Marvin Mims has the potential to be a superstar. I mean, he is all world athleticism. And then, the Pat Bryant might turn into something. I'm not holding my breath on Troy Franklin after last year's disappointment, but we'll see. But I think this receiving core is a little bit better than people think it is.
Yeah, and I think that you have to trust what Sean Payton can provide because obviously he was a Super Bowl type guy with New Orleans, had them very competitive, and I think that even last year when I was predicting this team to actually underachieve, I didn't think that they would maybe get to that 6 win threshold because I did not think Bo Nix would be that type of guy, but I should not have done that because I think that Sean Payton really elevates the floor of a lot of his football teams. I mean, you look at that first year in Denver with Russell Wilson, the year before they won 5 games, they underachieved. The next year they were near the playoffs, and it's not like many pieces on the team I think really improved. I think it was really just Sean Payton. He's going into year three. ESPN actually just today, as of the time of this recording, ranked Denver's coaching staff the sixth best in the NFL. How vital do you think Payton has been to kind of the progression of Bo Nix and overall justice roster as a whole?
Well, I think they're a perfect fit for each other. I think that Bo brings to the table what Sean Payton wants out of a quarterback, which is a guy that's not going to make mistakes, keep the offense on schedule, and those kinds of things. And that's what Sean Payton wants. Again, comes from that old school West Coast, excuse me, West Coast offense background, which is high percentage passes. We're going to work the ball down the field, that kind of thing. We're not slinging it all over the yard or whatever. Despite the fact that Breeze had 5,000 yard seasons under Sean Payton. A lot of that was just because he threw the ball 600 times in the season. So,
Right.
I think both fits what Sean Payton wants. I think Sean's a good coach. Obviously, got a Super Bowl there in New Orleans and all that. I think in order to make the Hall of Fame, he's going to need to do something nobody else has done, which is win a Super Bowl with two different teams. But I think he's a good coach. I think he ups the floor of this team, as you pointed out. I think in a lot of ways reminds me sort of maybe John Fox. A guy who comes in and elevates the floor of whatever it
Sure.
is, but you're not sure if he's the guy who's ultimately going to win. Foxy went to what, two Super Bowls, but didn't win any. I think with Sean, I don't know that he's the guy to get the Broncos back to another Super Bowl. That style of play that he has in the playoffs, I don't know if that works. It'll get you regular season wins. I just don't know if that works in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, the Saints did win a Super Bowl with Sean Payton, but they also did have some postseason disappointments that I think kind of overshadowed. Same goes for kind of Green Bay as well. I think Rodgers and Breeze, some of their postseason faults, I think, are going unnoticed because they did get that one championship kind of in that era mixed in with Tom Brady's dynasty, kind of in the middle of Tom Brady's almost like two mini dynasties. And then that
Mhm.
one stretch where the Patriots weren't as dominant. Needless to mention, that was a little while ago. Now we're here in 2025, and I think Denver has a really good chance. And we talked about it throughout the episode, and that's because of the defense. And I think just roster wise, looking at this defense on paper, clearly one of the best in the National Football League. I mean, we haven't even mentioned Pat Surtain yet in this episode, the reigning Defensive Player of the Year. Obviously, Nick Bonato was great last year. I mentioned the additions. How excited are you for this defense? You said they look great. How great will they be this coming year?
It might be the best defense in the league. I mean, I think, and especially the first couple of weeks, which is the easy part of the Broncos schedule, or the on paper easy part. I mean, it's the NFL,
Sure.
nothing's easy. But you get the Titans with a rookie quarterback making his first start, and you get the Colts. Then it's either going to be Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson, and you got to figure that's the easier part of your schedule before
Right.
you have to play the Bengals and then the Eagles and then go to London. So I think. I think this defense has the potential to be the best in the league. They're fast, they're aggressive, and they've got the ability to play any which way you want them to play. And so I think that's going to be great. Adding Jade Barron in the draft, I think is going to help out in the slot. Um, Everybody knows about Sertan. I think the interesting thing to me is how good that safety tandem is or can be. I mean, Hufanga's a great player when he's healthy.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And then Brandon Jones probably doesn't get his flowers the way he should.
Mhm.
Jones was a guy who came in and had the unenviable task of replacing a Broncos legend in Justin Simmons. And I'll tell you, we didn't hear one call for Simmons all season long. Jones was just out there playing his butt off and did a great job. And that's fascinating to me when one of the guys who is probably going to go in the Broncos Ring of Fame and Justin Simmons, wasn't there weren't any hey we missed Justin here kind of deals. I mean people missed him, but like overall that wasn't a talking point in sports talk. So yeah, the big question's the inside backer position. Dre Greenlaw, of course, coming back off injury, tweaked something a few weeks ago, tweaked something yesterday. Um, that's sort of eye-opening. Alex Singleton,
Yeah.
who's coming back off injury, broke his thumb. Drew Sanders, who was going to be in the rotation, he's hurt. He's done for the year. Sternad is somebody coming back off injury. Basically, Lavelle Bailey, who's made a big jump from camp last year to this year, is the only guy at the inside backer position right now that's healthy. And that's going to be a gigantic question mark if they're able to what they're able to get out of that group.
Absolutely, but I do think if the pass rush can step up and if the secondary can be solid, it could make up for maybe some of their inconsistencies. But absolutely, kind of over the middle of the field and the run defense as well, that they could struggle. I love that you mentioned Brandon Jones. I think he's been so great for this Denver team, as you mentioned. I mean, last year clearly a career season for over 100 tackles. First four turnovers when you include forced fumbles, interceptions, all that. Set a career high in approximate value, which is one of my favorite stats by Pro Football Reference. I think it does a great job of really analyzing the value a player adds. So yeah, he was great last year for Denver. I'm excited to see what this defense can do. Definitely going to try to get them on fantasy this year if they're available. Though that's going to be tough. I am excited to see what they can do. I think this Denver team could be great. Real quick before we look at the schedule and some of my projections, anything else that we haven't mentioned yet that concerns you maybe a little bit about this team heading into the year?
Well, the inside backer position, honestly, I mean, that really is one. On the defensive side, not really. They've got plenty of depth up front. They got plenty of depth at the edge. They got plenty of depth at corner, and plenty of depth at safety. In fact, they're going to have to make some cuts that they probably don't want to make at most of those other spots. The offensive side of the ball, I think the center position. I mean, you've got two guards that are highly paid, two tackles rather that are highly paid, and whatever you think of McGlinchey and Powers, certainly they're highly paid. Meinerz and Bowles played outstanding. McGlinchey and Powers have been serviceable. The center position, I think, is the one that you kind of have your eyeball on. It's Luke Wattenberg, and there's been a sort of functional strength issue there a little bit. That you saw early on with his predecessor Lloyd Cushenberry. We'll see. We'll see. Wattenberg. I mean, he was the guy last year, but we'll see if he continues to be the guy at the center position. I'm not really too worried about any of the rest of the offense. I know people talk about the receiving core, but while it's a quote unquote no name receiving core, that's kind of the way Sean Payton likes it, the way he's done things
Right.
over the years. And I think there's some guys on there that are good. I've mentioned Mims and Vele. Of course, they just drafted Pat Bryant and Troy Franklin's back in year two. And then Trent Sherfield, who they brought in for special teams, actually having a really good camp. So he's probably the sixth receiver there. So it'll be interesting to see overall in terms of if there's anything else that jumps out or injuries pile up. But inside backer and center, I think would be the two things you kind of have your eye on.
We will have to see what happens. I mean, personally, previously playing for the Ravens, I think Ben Powers did have that great year in Baltimore in 22. Maybe his 2 years in Denver, less, great. He hasn't played to that elite standard that he set in Baltimore when he signed that big contract after the 2022 season. So we'll see what happens in the interior of the offensive line. Overall, this team looks well positioned. We do this for every team real quick. Let's take a look at the schedule here real quick. About a middle of the pack schedule in terms of just strength. The AFC West, though, is obviously going to be very tough. Kansas City, need I say more? The Chargers, obviously led by Jim Harbaugh, Justin Herbert, and the Raiders are drastically improved as well now with Pete Carroll. So it's good. That's going to be a very, very tough division. Overall, you do play 9 games against winning teams from last year. Overall, what stands out to you from the schedule? 11-6 sound reasonable?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm looking over your predictions there. I think the only one I really disagree with, I think they'll probably lose to Philly before they go on the road to London to take on the Jets, and then I would probably flip. Um, I would probably flip that Raiders one. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. The rest of this looks about right. The only bone I'd have to pick out of there would be the Philly one. I think they probably lose that. But they could win some of the other ones, whether that's the Raiders or Washington or whomever to make up for it. Otherwise, yeah, that's probably about right. The Chargers swept them last year. That's gonna be a tough ask. You've got to get a win against Kansas City this year. But overall, that looks about right.
Yeah, I think the reason why I picked Philly is just I feel like football's so unpredictable. It's so hard to really figure out how a team's going to get to a specific amount of wins, in different situations. At Philadelphia, I mean, it's a tough game, obviously. The defending Super Bowl champions, running back a similar core. I just think to me, especially if I have them losing back-to-back games, sometimes the team just kind of plays with fire. I think Sean Payton plays well against higher level competition. You never know. I just think it's unpredictable in football, but absolutely that's going to be a tough matchup for him. I think overall 11-6 sounds right. I think overall it's week 15 and on that I'm really looking at this team though, and I'm saying, all right, what are they going to do? How are you going to get hot? Because I do have this team getting into the playoffs. How are you going? Are you going to be peaking at the right time? Are you going to be playing your best football when it matters most? And I think there are just kind of some key weeks that I want to schedule here that I think could help them out. You have that mini bye going into the game against Kansas City because you play the Raiders on primetime on Thursday Night Football the week before. Same goes for week 18 against the Chargers, Thursday night against the Chiefs in week 17. Those are two critical games that could possibly decide playoff tiebreakers, two divisional games. The fact that you get the mini bye in there and a bye to rest up before going on the road to Washington, I think the schedule makers did do them a favor there with some of the tweaks in that schedule.
Yeah, I mean it's a pretty tough schedule overall, but I do think you're right. I think you get a little bit of a break there. Now, of course, you don't get the bye coming back from London after the Jets, so that Giants game that you would normally think would be easy, you're coming back from London,
Yeah.
so you're losing travel days on top of that. At least you get a home game there, but losing the travel days hurts, and the Giants are a team you would think would be a win, but that could be tough readjusting to the time zone and trying to do all that. So. Yeah, overall, I mean, again, I have them at 10-7 this year, 11-6. I don't think it's that far off. I think it's totally feasible. Heck, I think 12 wins is feasible. The ball bounces right, but then again, so is 9 or 8 if the ball bounces wrong. So, but overall, I think as you look at this, I think October is really probably their month. They've got to stack wins in October. Probably sweep the month because if they don't, and they don't get those first two games, then they're going to be a world of hurt on the back end.
Absolutely, for sure. And I just think that week 7 game, I don't always love. I know the teams get the choice after the London game. It's not always, I think, the right choice to take the bye week, particularly, obviously, you mentioned there's no sit ups in the National Football League. The margin for error and the separator is more slim than people think. But if you're ever going to have a game where you are coming back home, you would want to play the New York Giants, I feel, at this point. Obviously, a team that was one of the worst in the NFL last year. And for a team that could be contending, I think the week 12 bye probably will help them out a little bit if they need to retool from injury or whatnot, just kind of readjust for the rest of the season. So I'm excited to see how this does play out. A decently difficult schedule at some points, but also a few areas where they can capitalize on some opportunities here. Benjamin, this has been great talking. Obviously, you're around this Denver facility a lot. You know this team like the back of your hand. You've seen them play for many years, and now you see the construction of this roster. You mentioned 10-7. What's kind of your ceiling? What's kind of your floor for this team? Any Super Bowl aspirations from Denver this year?
I think they're probably a year out from that. I mean, the ball bounces right, and you get in the playoffs, ball bounces right. You never know, but I think they're probably a year out from Super Bowl aspirations. I think they need one more certified playmaker on the offensive side. They're kind of hoping Ingram and Dobbins and Harvey are that, but we'll see. I think the floor. I think the worst is like 8 wins. Even if they have Jarrett Stidham back there, if Bo Nix gets hurt and Stidham's playing things, I think they can get to 8. I think the best case scenario is probably about 12 wins. And that's if the ball bounces right. You catch a couple of good teams with a quarterback out, that kind of thing. You might be able to pull that off. So I think the ceiling is win a game in the playoffs. I think the floor is just outside the playoffs at 8 and 9 on the season.
Yeah, and it was the conversation we had to begin the show. Record is not always an indicator of success, and this team could very well go 9-8 again, barely sneak into the playoffs. But if they're positioned well and they get hot at the right time, as you keep saying with the metaphor, if the ball bounces the right way, you just never know what could happen in January. Benjamin Allbright, thank you so much for joining us here today on 32 on 32 here on Chase's Sports News. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.
Thank you so much for coming on. Denver Broncos, a lot of conversation. I hope the audience listening did enjoy. If you guys did, please be sure to like, subscribe. It helps the channel out a ton. We would really appreciate it. And stay tuned. We have many more teams to go right here as we preview every team season on 32 on 32 on Chase's Sports News. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Signing off right here, I am your host, Chase Coburn from Chase's Sports News.